Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to your ASU member briefing about the SHADS Modern Award Review and our union wins for community and disability sector workers. I'm Judith Wright. I'm the Deputy Secretary of the ASU here in New South Wales and ACT. Welcome to our webinar on our recent union win for community and disability sector workers. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and their elders past, present and emerging. I'm joining you today from Gadigal land in Redfern, Sydney. I'm Judith Wright. I'm the Deputy Secretary of the ASU here in New South Wales and ACT, and I'm here to talk to you about an important union win for community and disability sector workers. Just by way of background, your award, the SHADS Award, was made 11 years ago on the 1st of January 2010, and since then there have been two reviews of the award in 2012 and 2014. We won some improvements in the 2012 award review, and then we lodged our first claims for improvements in the 2014 award review more than 6 years ago. So we've had 6 years now of hearings, of submissions, of commissioning expert reports, of members participating in surveys and members appearing in the Fair Work Commission and being cross-examined by employer representatives. And then finally last week, on the 4th of May, the Fair Work Commission issued a 378-page decision. That decision revealed improvements to minimum engagement periods for part-time workers, broken shifts, remote response for call to work, sleepovers, clothing and equipment, roster changes, travel time, part-time work. There was also an employer claim that was dealt with regarding client cancellation. That claim was accepted, but after arguments from your union, very important safeguards were imposed. The only claim that we weren't able to progress through the Modern Award Review was for a community language allowance. This is an incredibly important claim and continues to be a high priority for ASU members, and will continue to advocate for a community language allowance through our civil society campaign, both with funding bodies and employers. The case involved over 2,000 ASU members from around the country participating. Our members participate in surveys that form the basis of academic research that was presented to the Commission. Members were also interviewed by academics, and members gave evidence. They provided witness statements to the Fair Work Commission and were questioned both by Fair Work Commission members and by employer representatives. And I just really want to congratulate those thousands of ASU members who participated and delivered those really fantastic improvements for all community and disability services workers. I'm now just going to go to the particular items that we won. Now, this is a 378-page decision. We're still reading through that decision and digesting it, but we can tell you what we won and what the next steps are going to be. There's obviously a lot more detail, and as it comes to hand, we'll let you know about the detail. But to start with, minimum engagements. Now, this is a really significant issue, particularly for our part-time members. This is the minimum period that an employer is required to pay you for work. Minimum engagement periods already apply to casual employees, and the Fair Work Commission has decided, after arguments and advocacy from your union, that these minimum engagement periods will now apply to part-time employees. So the ASU's claim was for all employees to have a 3-hour minimum engagement period. We were partially successful, with the Fair Work Commission deciding that both part-time and casual disability workers will have a 2-hour minimum engagement period, and that all other social and community service workers who are part-time or casual will have a 3-hour minimum engagement period. That means that even if your employer does not roster you for a 2 or a 3-hour engagement, they still have to pay you for that period. We also had a significant outcome in relation to broken shifts. As things stand currently, an employer can roster employees over a 12-hour period with multiple unpaid breaks. That often means that employees are rostered to work quite short periods but to be away from home virtually all day. So you can have a situation where a disability worker is only paid for working 6 hours because there's multiple breaks during the day, but is actually required to be away from home for 12 hours. It's not fair for employees to be required to work in this way, and we've always said they should be compensated for this. So the ASU made a claim for a broken shift allowance. The Fair Work Commission has decided, based upon ASU arguments and witness statements from your colleagues, that a broken shift can only include one unpaid break other than a meal break. Now, this is a really significant improvement to the current clause, and that an employee will receive a broken shift allowance of $17.10 per shift. The employer and employee can agree to the employee having 2 unpaid breaks other than a meal break during a shift. In this case, the employee will receive a larger broken shift allowance of $25.15 per broken shift. Now, in relation to remote response and recall to work, we know that employees are often asked by their employers to respond to phone calls and emails after they finish work for the day. And this sometimes happens if the employee is rostered to be on call, and it sometimes happens if they're not rostered to be on call. But we know that when employees perform work after hours without physically returning to the workplace, employers often dispute that they're entitled to payment for this work, and this creates very unfair outcomes. So we argued that employees should be properly compensated for working, regardless of whether this work is performed at the workplace or remotely, and the Fair Work Commission agreed with us. Now, both the union and the employers had different ideas about the appropriate amount of compensation, and the Fair Work Commission has actually come up with its own formula, which takes some of the ASU's ideas and some of the employers' ideas. And so the Fair Works Commission's provisional view is that if you do remote response work, so that is if you respond to phone calls or emails, 6 a.m. and 10 p.m, you should actually get a payment on top of your on-call allowance of 30 minutes minimum. So even if you get a phone call just for 5 minutes, you should be paid for 30 minutes. And then if you do remote response work between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m, the minimum payment should be 1 hour. However, the Fair Work Commission said there needs to be further consideration about whether the payment should be at ordinary time or overtime rates. And the Commission's actually going to convene a conference to further discuss those issues. And I'll tell you more about the conference at the end of the presentation. There have been some improvements to the sleepover provisions, with the Fair Work Commission accepting the arguments from unions that there should be clean bed linen and a use of food preparation facilities. In relation to clothing and equipment, the Fair Work Commission agreed with unions that the award should provide for the reimbursement of reasonable costs associated with cleaning or replacement of personal clothing which has been soiled or damaged in the course of employment. And the Fair Work Commission has directed the employer and union representatives to confer about the form of this entitlement. And I'll tell you more about that conference later in the presentation. In relation to roster changes, the Fair Work Commission has expressed a provisional view that rosters can be changed at any time only if the change is proposed by an employee to accommodate an agreed shift swap with another employee or to enable the service of the organisation to be carried out where another employee is absent from duty on account of illness or an emergency. And again, this is a provisional view by the Fair Work Commission, and they are inviting submissions from unions and employers, which will be discussed during the upcoming conference, which I'll talk to you about shortly. In relation to travel time, this is an incredibly important issue to our members. We know that members spend a lot of the time on the road between visiting clients in their home, and currently they're not compensated for this travel time. The Fair Work Commission agreed with the ASU that employers should be compensated for time spent travelling between engagements, but they're going to consider this issue further. Again, this is an issue that will be talked about at the upcoming conference. In relation to part-time workers, There are some important safeguards with the Fair Work Commission agreeing with unions that working additional hours should always be voluntary. So part-time workers should never be required by their employers to work additional hours. But where part-time employees do work additional hours regularly, they may request that their guaranteed hours be reviewed and increased, and their employer cannot unreasonably refuse such a request. This is an incredibly important outcome. We know that many of our members are often engaged on employment contracts that have very low minimum hours, and in fact, those minimum hours do not reflect the actual hours that our members are working. This important clause will mean that if you are engaged on very minimum hours, but you're regularly working increased hours, your guaranteed hours can be increased to reflect the actual hours that you're working. Client cancellation. This is a clause that so far has only applied to home care employees, and the employer groups argued that this clause should be extended to disability employees. We vigorously opposed this claim, but we said that if the Fair Work Commission was prepared to accept client cancellation, there should be very important safeguards, and employees should not be worse off. The Fair Work Commission has decided that a number of really important safeguards will apply to client cancellation in the disability and home care sector. So first of all, if a service is cancelled by a client within 7 days of the scheduled service, the employer may either direct the employee to perform other work during those hours in which they are rostered, or cancel the rostered shift. Now, if the employee is directed to perform other work, the employee has to be paid the greater of the amount that the employee would have received if they'd actually performed the cancelled service, or the amount payable in respect of the work actually performed. So what this means is that if the employer is directing the employee to perform other work, and that work is of a different classification or complexity to the work that the employee was rostered to carry out, the employee can't be any worse off financially. So they've got to be paid the higher amount, whether that amount is higher in terms of the work that the employee was rostered to perform or the alternative work. Now, if the employer cancelled the shift, the employer has to either pay the employee the amount they would have received if the shift had not been cancelled, or provide the employee with a make-up shift within 6 weeks of the date of the cancelled shift. Now, if the shift is cancelled less than 12 hours before it's due to commence, the employee must be paid for the shift. So the employer cannot require the employee to work make-up time. And also, the make-up time arrangement cannot be used where the employer is permitted to charge the client in relation to the cancelled service. So in other words, if the employer can charge the client for the cancelled service, they have to pay the employee. Now, in relation to most of those claims, apart from the broken shift allowance, the Fair Work Commission still needs to confirm their provisional view or hear further from the employer and the union reps. So what the Fair Work Commission will be doing is they'll be convening a conference on Thursday, the 27th of May, to discuss the travel time claim, the remote response recall to work claims, and the clothing and equipment claims. And in relation to the other issues that it has expressed a provisional view about, they've asked union and employer reps to lodge further submissions and witness statements by Tuesday, the 22nd of June. So we'll be busy over the coming weeks preparing for the conference, so getting together further information about the travel time claim, what we think that should look like, about the remote response recall to work claim and the clothing and equipment claims. And in relation to those other claims that the Fair Work Commission has expressed provisional views about, we'll be lodging further submissions and witness statements well before the 22nd of June deadline. Now, when do these changes take effect? Well, the Fair Work Commission will consider all of the information that's shared at that conference on the 27th of May. They'll consider all of those submissions and evidence that are filed on the 22nd of June. They may have further hearings, but their intention at this stage is that the changes to the award will take effect on the 1st of October. Now, that date could change depending upon what the union and employer reps say in their submissions and further witness statements, but at this point in time, that's what the Fair Work Commission's intention is. So in terms of, I guess, the next steps in this matter, we'll be doing all that work, and we're likely to come back to you and give you another member briefing after that conference on the 27th of May. If you do have any questions about this modern award review, the improvements that have been made, please do contact us on 93104000 or email us at help@asu.org.au, and we'll also be in touch with you after the 27th of May to bring you a further update about the improvements to your award. But thank you so much for joining us today.